everyone, and welcome to your Daily Detroit, sharing what to know, and apparently there's snow in Metro Detroit. I am Chair Stays. It is Wednesday, November 1st, 2023. Joining me across the table in Detroit's North End is...
Norris Howard.
Good to see you, sir.
Hey, how's it going? I am very happy to be back in the city. I always feel rejuvenated when I get to come to town, so it's always wonderful.
But in person, there's just a better flow.
It's the energy, man. It's the energy. It's the vibes, as they say.
We're going to talk about 3 stories today. It's going to be an interesting setup because I think there are some echo booms, reverberations of GM, Ford, and Stellantis all having deals. We actually talked to a former AFL-CIO political director earlier in the week looking at the national thing. But I want to talk about a black and white, green money business implication and news this morning, according to Nathan Bomey over at Axios. And shout out to Nathan. He's been on the show a couple times. He's the lead reporter for Detroit's bankruptcy back in the past. Has a great book about it that you're going to want to check out. But his reporting shares that Toyota is raising their factory wages after the settlements, and it's literally happening days later. This isn't even like, we're not even going to wait a week or two to like get out of the news cycle. It's like, boom. And I think, although there's always been kind of that shadowing, I wonder if this is going to portend for some interesting things ahead.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, first of all, UAW President Shawn Fain has said on record that, listen, we want to unionize Toyota. We want to unionize Tesla.
The dream of the big 3, by the way. The big 3, the owners, the big 3, the CEOs would love that to happen.
They would love it.
Yeah.
They would love it because, you know, either one of two things happen. Either the whole situation becomes more competitive and now it becomes tougher for those companies to build those cars at the price that they sell them at, or they choose to essentially leave America, which would make the United States the domain of the big 3 totally once more. But in this reporting from Labor Notes and Axios, it was said that pay increases of about $2.94, so roughly $3 for the production workers and an almost $4 rise for the skilled trade employees, all working for Toyota. So a pretty sizable raise for everybody. And here's the thing. Toyota does not want that UAW smoke. They don't want it. They saw what it cost the big 3 billions with a B. Billions. I'm starting to see numbers upwards of $8.5 to $9 billion is the total toss of the strike between all the big 3. Toyota does not want that. They don't want it because if those plants in that company unionizes, it gives the workers power. And if they shut down Toyota for that same amount of time, I don't think they necessarily have these sort of foothold culturally that the big 3 has, and it could spell some really terrible things for their operations in the States.
I think there is something different about this time. I know that I had a friend that actually predicted the strike length to the day, which I'm pretty proud of. Shout out to Eric, who's been on the show before, Eric Tritko. So to me, this could be a huge story to cover going forward because the old UAW, you could be like, oh, they're crooked. You're already starting to see it. You're already starting to see back channels of, well, is the UAW really changed? Because the people did get, like, there were people who were thrown in jail for this. Yeah. And that was a pretty foolproof argument that those foreign automakers and Tesla, let's throw Tesla in there, who we all know this is, once this hits anywhere near Tesla's shores, this is going to turn into a crap show publicly.
Oh, yeah. Stay off social media once that happens.
But I think that this could be a huge culture change. And I think that maybe this time they could make some inroads. You know, with the older UAW and what was going on before, they couldn't make inroads at, say, Amazon. But some independents made some inroads at unionizing Amazon. But those independents don't have the same financial backing as the UAW. So when it comes to the contract stage, they're having more trouble getting through it. And if you see this victory and then you see a Democratic union, I wonder if people are going to take a flyer on it.
I think one of the main things that you're seeing is beyond just a culture change. I do think it's a generational change. It's part of what you talked about on the show the other day about unionization nationwide. Younger Gen X, millennials, and Gen Z are starting to see the benefits of collective action. I think boomers, unfortunately, kind of let the ball drop on unions. I think generally there was a shift to the right with that generation a little bit. And so, you saw a lot of states go right to work. You saw sort of I don't want to say support for unions, because plenty of people, especially here in Southeast Michigan, were a part of unions, but you saw the rhetoric around unions changing. When it came down to this newer generation, who I think have been conjoined through things like social media, and they see the power of collective action online, especially in the post BLM era. Now you see these people who say, wait a minute, can we bring that same energy to the workplace? And I think that is the difference here.
And communication is going to be so important. I wrote a piece on our Substack about Shawn Fain and how he's communicating better than the big three. There is going to have to be a revolution among the big three communication shops in order for them to properly talk about this. And all automotive communication shops, because it is a completely different world, and it feels like a lot of them are behind.
The PR firms got their asses kicked. Let me put it that way for the big three, okay? You had a guy in Shawn Fain who went out, got in front of a microphone, and said, this is what's happening with us.
Very similar to Walter Reuther.
Seriously, straight talk, plain language, to the point. This is what you're doing. Give us our money. And the sort of communications apparatus of the big three and these large conglomerates, I think sometimes can't keep up with that level of dynamism, with having a figurehead that is really engaging in that way. None of the CEOs are like that. None of the
whole industry has some issues with that.
Exactly.
I mean, look, this auto show comes up, there are a bunch of people I know who just didn't get invitations,
Right.
didn't get any kind of outreach to it, who, by the way, reach the people who are trying to sell cars to. But it's this blindness. It's like that we did things a certain way 20 years ago, and we're still going to do it, and it's going to hurt the big three. And I think it does hurt, especially now with, look, I am not the biggest Tesla fan, but Elon Musk has been a master of getting buzz around his brand.
Yeah, 1,000%. And, I think the only one who even halfway understands this a little bit is Bill Ford. But the other I don't even know who's in charge at Stellantis, right? You have Mary Barr at GM, who, at least in my opinion, as somebody who is in media, does everything she can to never, ever talk to the media. And then on top of that, who are the dynamic leaders of these major companies that can come out and engage people? And the UAW and other unions will have the advantage in that point.
Now, there is Farley. He does some stuff, but I think a lot of people wanted to hear from Bill Ford Jr.
Yeah. Flat out.
I mean, that sounds silly, and I know he's not the CEO, but it's his name on the door. It's his
name.
family name on the door.
It's his name on the door. I mean, I'm not necessarily saying let's go back to the days of like Lee Iacocca or anything like that.
But Elon Musk kind of did.
But he did.
To be honest.
Exactly. He became a figurehead for all of his companies. He would get out in front. He basically was selling the cars itself. And, that thing, the big three has lost touch with. And I think the UAW and Shawn Fain took advantage of that. And you're starting to see the ramifications of that echo even to automakers who are not unionized.
I'd love to hear all of your thoughts. And I know that some of those automotive communications people listen to this show because I've gotten emails from them. dailydetroit@gmail.com, 313-789-3211. So, Norris Howard, do you still like cash?
It's cool. Yeah.
Well, cash is still king in Metro Detroit. A new study came out that showed, and this is from some gambling site,
yes, like Canada Bets or something.
Something like that. But I thought it was interesting because Michigan fared so low in scores for debit cards, credit cards, usage of those things, and very high on being about cash and things accepting only cash. And I can tell you, even over the weekend, I did a little trip and Western Michigan, cash all the way, man.
Yeah, this was a report actually from Casino Canada that came out, and it essentially stated that Michigan is the least prepared of all 50 states to become a cashless society. And I'm going to be perfectly honest with you. I don't care, because everybody talks about becoming cashless. Everybody talks about how that's so beneficial, but is it? And I ask the question because it, to me, feels like, and no, people are not going to like when I say this, it feels like another microaggression against poor people. And what I mean by that is typically if you're somebody of a lower income or you just kind of work a rinky-dink little job, you're probably not walking around with, high-end credit cards. You don't have an Amex in your back pocket. You might have an entry level, Capital One, and that might have, a couple $100 on it that you keep for emergencies. Most people are walking around here with debit cards and cash. And I think it's another one of those ways for us to say, if you don't have credit cards or if you don't have the tap or whatever, like, you shouldn't be shopping here. We don't want you here. And on top of that, just the versatility of cash. I don't care when people say, oh, there's Cash App, there's Venmo, there's PayPal. No, if I have $5 in my pocket and my friend needs $5, it's really nice to be able to go in my pocket and still hand them $5. Like, it's very simple. I don't think we need to walk away from cash. It's kind of silly to me.
I think that is the thought behind some of the ordinances with the city of Detroit, and meaning that you have to, like all venues, if they are cashless, they have to go ahead and be able to load up a debit card that they can then empty for places like LCA and other large places. I understand everything you're saying. I just know that there's a number of businesses that have said, hey, having cash is a security concern for being broken into and things like that. Look, in general, I am 100% in agreement with you because I've shared this before, but it's been a while.
Who is running up into the bakery and holding people up for cash? When have you heard of that?
I mean, there's the break-ins, but you should take your cash box out.
Yeah, you should take your cash box out. But when have you heard of that? Like, this is one of those things that people are just afraid of just because conceptually it's a thing. No, that doesn't happen.
So when I was a kid, there was a toy store near me, and I was really excited to go. And as I shared on another episode, like my dad thought that Orange Faygo was orange juice. And so I really wanted to go to this place there. It had some cool toys I really liked. But we didn't have cards. Like, we didn't have anything like that. But we had cash and I had saved. And I really wanted this thing. And I'll never forget that feeling as a kid being like, when they said, you can't buy it here because you don't have a credit card. And I literally, this is before Amazon and all this other kind of stuff. And I guess that's a core memory for me of if you don't have certain things, you automatically cannot be here.
Yep.
And I think that formative memory as a child made me some of the ways that I am today about equity. Because when you experience that and you're like, I really want that toy rocket.
Not for you.
And it's not for you through no reason of your own, that no matter how hard you work, there's the other things that are going on. Mm-hmm. It was a simple but strong lesson for me that there are the haves and have-nots. And it's stupid because it's a rock and it's a toy, it doesn't matter. But let me tell you, I cried for 2 blocks.
But that's what I'm saying. And it's, combining that with certain people who, may have difficulties obtaining bank accounts and credit card accounts. There are people who, again, of no fault of their own, whose credit may be messed up from really crappy parents putting bills in their names and all sorts of stuff.
People don't realize that kind of stuff happens.
Exactly. There are kids out here who are 19 and 20 years old with really crappy credit because they have crappy parents. And so there's a lot of things that go into why certain people don't have credit cards or don't have plastic. So, not having cash available is just another one of those things that, to your point, Jer, just tells people that they do not belong somewhere. And I just wholeheartedly resist that. I just think it's silly. And at the end of the day, the money is still the money. So who cares what form it comes in?
And my tiny little libertarian streak kind of likes cash. You know what I mean? I've had a change in my beliefs over the years. And for me, that's something I hold on to, where it's like, oh, you got $10, you have $10.
Yeah. And the last point I want to make is that, you hear a lot of this from, I think, more liberal folks. They like, cashless because they like tech. They like advancement.
And I'm not against having it.
And I'm not against having it.
It should be
either.
there, but I'm saying the other shouldn't be shut off.
But I think also you can't talk about equity, as you said, and talk about making a society that accepts people of all economic levels and also be pro-cashless society. Those two ideas don't jive.
Speaking of spending money, turns out that the Southland Center Mall, according to Cranes Detroit, is under consideration for sale. Now, we've mentioned this on the show a while back because Devin O'Reilly had some pretty big memories of it. I was surprised because I was running errands. I need to go to Best Buy for something. I don't even remember what now. And this place was like mostly full. And I hadn't been to a mostly full mall since 1998.
Yeah.
And yet, this still, because they had taken out a whole bunch of loans and other issues, Southland Center in Taylor is possibly up for sale with a 94% occupancy rate.
That is odd, 94%.
Right? That's why I'm mentioning it, because like, who knew that the mall would still, I always thought that it was like, oh, kind of busy. And I mentioned on air, kind of busy for a mall nowadays. But to see the statistic of 94% and that they have like positive cash flow, I'm
That's
sitting there
crazy.
going, what are they doing over there? Is it the market? Is it the mix of stores? I'm trying to figure that out because I went and I'm like, wow, I've got these huge nostalgia vibes and I'm not mad at it.
I think of Taylor and I think of Southland because I've been to Southland a few times. I was much more of a Fairlane, Northland kid. But, I think of Southland and I think of what else is in Taylor. And this is no diss of people to Taylor, but that's like the largest, economic center in terms of like retail, in
It's
the
very
city.
distributed down there.
Yeah.
It's very like Taylor quickly converted from one part of it was kind of suburby, like expansion of Allen Park. You can even see it in
Yeah.
the houses and the sidewalks where it goes from looking a lot like Allen Park to just almost farmland.
Yeah, exactly. So, I think the quote unquote lack of other stuff really benefits the mall. Whereas you look at places like Southfield and Fairlane that are in, much larger cities that, have other zoned commercial areas. I think it just became a lot easier for a place like Southland to succeed. And, I really like malls.
Really?
I feel very sad that we're in kind of a post-mall society. Yeah, because I'm an extrovert and I like people and I like people watching and I have very, very fond, vivid memories of skipping school to go to the mall and the new Jordan or the new shoe comes out. So we go to the mall and we wait in line, or the new game is coming out. So we go to the mall and we wait in line and, you go up there and you talk to girls and you try to get their phone numbers and stuff. Like, I feel like it was such a vital third space for the adolescent in American culture. It is a distinctly American thing. And I just think the loss of that also, I think, maybe contributes to a little bit of the loss of the closeness that we have within our cities and within our communities, because it's just another third space that teens and young adults don't have.
For me, I prefer downtowns and the rise of downtowns over malls because it provides a lot of those things without some of the privately owned space drawbacks.
Sure.
But I think the mall is that continuation of that idea that we need to come together. I'm not mad at the rise of downtowns because they help fill that gap. But I feel like here in Metro Detroit, in many cases, not all, we've gone from the mall to nothing.
Exactly, and that's my point.
There's Royal Oak, there's Ferndale, there's a couple other places, but for the most part, we've gone from the mall to Amazon.
But like, how many groups of teenagers do you see hanging out in Royal Oak or even in downtown Detroit? You don't see it that much.
No.
You don't. And to me, it was a very important aspect of, in particular, teenage life that, I feel sad because they don't have a replacement for that third space.
This was actually built by the Hudson's Company.
Yep.
And I had forgotten that it was Northland, Eastland, Southland, Westland,
Yep.
all Hudson's as part of their big expansion and everything they did. I was just talking to somebody over the weekend how much I think that the series of brands that bought Hudson's should have kept that local name. I feel like it would have had a lot more for all of whether it was that or Lazarus in Ohio or let's see, it was Macy's that bought.
No, first was Marshall Fields.
Marshall Fields,
Yeah.
yeah. Like keeping those local names, I think would have been a good idea because those brands resonate with people, even if it is just rebranded. I don't know what you think. You're more of a marketing guy.
I think it would have helped a little bit. I think obviously brand continuity across all the things you own is typically the MO, but I think it would have benefited, especially in certain markets, especially here in the Midwest. Macy's just doesn't evoke the same level of familiarity, I think, for shoppers in this area, and it would have helped, but I think that still doesn't save malls. I think when you think about what we're talking about now, what would have saved malls is thinking about malls as a part of the community, because when we grew up, Jared, the mall was far flung, surrounded by acres and acres of asphalt and parking lots. And I think the best
Eastland, man.
Exactly. And the best way I think for us to rethink those things would have been, okay, let's take out some of these parking lots, let's put in some apartment buildings, and let's make the mall a aspect of the community to where somebody who lives in one of these apartment parks can say, oh man, I need a new pair of shoes for work. Let me just walk on down. We could have had the covered breezeways that could have, hey man, let's go walk right to the mall and get some shoes. I think that would have been great. And you see that in other cities. I was in Boston not too long ago. There's apartments directly connected to the mall next to the Prudential Center in Back Bay. So
you saw what's going over at Northland, though. Have you driven by recently?
Yes, I have. So that's being redeveloped into almost all residential with some street level commercial. And it looks like it's going to be a really cool place. It looks like it's going to be pretty walkable, going to have, different income levels that are all going to be living there. But the mall itself is gone. And so, again, to me, it's just that loss of an area for people to congregate that doesn't involve drinking, because that seems to be the only third space that we still have left.
And coffee shops, too.
And coffee shops. Coffee shops.
But usually the coffee shops that do well
have alcohol.
Have alcohol in the
Yeah.
evenings or whatever.
And
yeah.
so if you're sober or if you're just underage, you kind of don't have a lot of places to just go kick it. I think that's a big loss for us.
One thing I hear a lot from Gen Z listeners is the frustration of that third place that doesn't involve alcohol. I'm not, as much as we'll talk about drinking, and some people, like, they're not even going sober. They're just like, look, I just don't want to drink all the time. That is something that has ruffled the feathers, I think, of some Gen Zers across. And I don't want to use it as a pejorative at all. I'm really not. It's more of, hey, can there be options that if it's not alcoholic, that it's not just for kids?
Yeah, and we've also seen that Gen Z prefers to smoke weed and do shrooms than they do to drink alcohol. When we think about the loss of the mall, to your point, Jer, we haven't replaced it with anything else. And that's to the loss of the generations coming after us.
Well, do you have nostalgic memories of sitting in that massage chair that you put $1 in? You have cash, right? You can swipe, but you can put the dollar in.
See, but you need cash. You need cash. You needed cash to do it. I know they have the tap on the machines now, but you needed cash for those machines.
When I was a corporate road warrior, there was nothing better than if you were able to be a little bit ahead of time with your gate and get a 10-minute chair massage. I was that guy, like, oh, I'm on my way to Charlotte. Anyway, 313-789-3211, dailydetroit@gmail.com. Norris Howard, so good to see you.
It's always good to be here, Jer.
With that, I am Jer Stays. Thank you so much for listening. Remember, we do Daily Detroit every single weekday. Remember that you are somebody. We'll see you around Detroit.